Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Judas. We're off to a great start here with the very first item being in the treasure room, Bob's brain. I decided not to pick it up because I felt like it was a bit too dangerous with us only having one red health, but also the past few times I've picked up Bob's brain I've always gotten Mr. Mega, and that just resulted in an unnaturally high damage penalty which could have been easily avoided. So this time I decided, even though I'm the kind of person to pick up silly items like that, maybe I won't indulge myself into the craziness that is Bob's brain. I'm not just gonna leave it behind. I think that decision did pay off in some sense, but I also think that in retrospect it would have been very useful in this particular run. First of all, like I said, there wasn't Mr. Mega, which makes this item like 10 times better at least. But also, just because there was a huge lack of consumables in a lot of cases, mostly keys though, but still having that explosion, that Bob's brain in some rooms can really be helpful, because you never know, you might find a secret room or maybe a second secret room, you might blow up a random Titadrock or whatever, and that just gives you that little oomph or that push that you need in order to really get rolling. And it's one of those things where I feel like if you just get a single key and open up more chests, then you just get more keys in return, and it's this self-sustaining economy. This is something that happened in this particular run, and I got Mom's Key and Guppy's Tail. And obviously you can imagine that there's a lot of golden chests because of Guppy's Tail, but if you don't have keys to open them, you really can't take advantage of that passive of Mom's Key, which gives you more consumable payouts whenever you open up a golden chest. And of course, all I required was one key to actually get going, and then one chest gave me 2 keys, and then I was able to open 2 more chests, and that gave me more keys. And at that point, it's a self-sustaining exercise, so to say. So if you have just one additional bomb sometimes and uncover that secret room, it can contain something like the skeleton key, you never know, and otherwise you wouldn't be able even to get into it, and that just really gives you that push or that oomph that you need in the run to turn a bad run into a really good one, or at least a run that is seldomly enjoyable to use. But beyond that, I would say that this particular run, when I'm just talking about enjoyable runs, wasn't very enjoyable. And again, I'm not really sure what brought onto that. I think any run for me which has a high shot speed is automatically a bit on the boring side in some sense. I think I'm kind of getting used to it, because I feel like the shot speed does tend to increase overall as you pick up more items. And in Afterbirth Plus, I think there were quite a bit of items added, or at least there are some common items which tend to increase your shot speed, and it just kind of throws me off in some sense. But more so than that, there's a lot of rooms which had a lot of rocks in them, or maybe there were a lot of rooms or enemies like ghosts, and all of those require a very certain type of run, or maybe a certain type of items to kind of help you going. And especially because I'm so used to maybe playing with flight or just any way to shoot over rocks, I was unable to deal with some of these rooms, and it was very annoying getting into the position to really shoot those enemies which were hiding behind obstacles. And I felt like it was one of those runs which just had a ton of rooms like that, and that just made it maybe a bit inherently unfun for me. But there's also another aspect to it, and for some reason, sometimes when I play with very high speed, I feel very comfortable with it, I feel like I can dodge, but other times I feel like I have too much velocity, so I can't stop at a moment's notice, which means that whenever I try to dodge, I might dodge in the right direction, but I don't stop at the right time, and I kind of underestimate how much of that velocity I have, so I just kind of drift away into a tear or a projectile, and that just manages to hit me. And it's, I don't know, I feel like I should be used to those things at this point in time, but then again, I guess the physics of this game are a bit inconsistent, in the sense that sometimes you have a 1.75 speed and sometimes you have something like 1.9 speed, and they might feel very similar, and to your subconscious they might be pretty much the same, but the thing is that it can be the difference between you walking that extra centimeter or a half an inch or whatever into an obstacle or a projectile which otherwise you would have been able to dodge. And it, like I said before, it just depends on the room layouts that you get and just the items and just the overall theme of the run. But I feel like in this particular case, everything did go kind of wrong for me, and maybe that's just because I had a few bad dailies, so my game isn't really on point, which also led to my premature death. So that's a bit of a spoiler, but I think it's kind of expected, especially if you follow me in Greed. But I know some of you do, and that just goes to show that you can't win every run. I think I know there are some people who play pretty much every single daily and they just manage to win every run, but I'm not really sure how you do it, because if nothing else, at least one day maybe you get like 2 hours of sleep at night, because for whatever reason, you know, bad things happen in life and you're just not focused. And I tend to find the data tracks for my value of how well I play the game, and I think that's natural. I think maybe some people are immune to that, to just overall life, and then when they get into the zone of Isaac, they maybe just zone out to just always play really well. And I don't doubt that, of course, but I still feel like there are bound to be some days, maybe they're just some layouts or maybe some rune generation which just isn't pleasant for you. So I don't know how other people do it. I'm really in awe whenever I see those good scores, and when you see the same people keep performing well, I'm just kind of impressed by how well they can actually perform in all of these dailies and not just one. But one thing that I feel was particularly good for me on this run was this boss rush, and only managed to get hit once in the entirety of it, and it was a champion version of boss rush. Thankfully there weren't any super hard waves as they sometimes tend to be, and there weren't some of the harder bosses like the bloat and maybe something else. So I still feel like it was one of those boss rushes which was difficult, but it wasn't unfairly difficult as sometimes it tends to be. And the room layout was also quite nice. At least we had enough room to maneuver, and the spikes in the middle did actually serve to be quite useful against some enemies which happened to kill themselves on them. So I just felt like with some Algiz runes, and overall I played this particular boss rush well, even if the rest of my game was bad. So at least I have one silver lining, I'm able to say. Even though I played badly, at least I only got hit once in boss rush, and I think even that was just me dodging in the wrong direction and just walking into the enemy, which is not that surprising all in all. But you can imagine that this champion bosses actually do deal one full heart of damage to you, so I was actually very scared that I'm just gonna end up eating the fat one, so to say, dying in a position where you're not that comfortable with only 3 spirit hearts. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean 3 full total hearts, or at least I wasn't comfortable in that position, so I was on my toes the entire time, because I knew as soon as I get hit once, they're just gonna spiral to me getting hit one more time, and then I'm gonna be near death essentially. So I was glad that there were some Algiz runes to help me get through some of those annoying bosses, but also I feel like I played well. I'm really kind of proud of that. I did decide here to stick with Diplopia instead of the Book of Belial, and the Book of Belial is great, don't get me wrong, but I do think it loses on its effectiveness the later you go into the game, and the main reason for that is just it's a flat damage upgrade, and of course with plus 2 damage the enemies do scale as well. Well, plus 2 damage is always great, I would never turn that down. It's still a very situational upgrade, and you have to use it at least every 3 rooms. And what that ends up, or at least what that means, is that plus 3 damage or plus 2 damage that you get is not going to be as effective as if you just had it passively, and in that case I thought maybe that keeping Diplopia is better, because if I found something like the Pact or maybe even any other damage upgrade item, I'm going to be able to Diplopia it and just get a permanent damage upgrade, and I just felt like in this case this would be better. But also, I think that the later that you go on, even though you have a higher chance of getting that devil deal, this run just wasn't very nice to us. Devil deal regarding wise, there just weren't devil deals, or at least they didn't show up until later into the game, so they weren't really helpful. But still, I feel like the longer your run goes on, the stronger you tend to be, which means that the flat increase in damage is going to be less effective the longer the run goes on. So you can imagine, let's say that on average you get something like plus 1 damage every floor, and you can imagine that as the later you go on, or at least the longer that the run is, the less relative difference that plus 2 damage will be from Book of Belial. So I think it's only natural that you replace it at some point. Obviously it's a great item for the first 4 or maybe even first 6 floors, especially in boss rush, but I feel like Diplopia has a lot more uses. And in this case, what I decided to do is, since there weren't any really good items to duplicate and then pick up, I just figured I'm gonna keep it for breaking sake. And what I decided to do here, or at least what I thought I was gonna do, is keep the Yara rune, not the Yara, the Pertro rune and the Algiz rune, and then I hoped that just by the virtue of exploring Shoal, I would be finding something like the Temperance card and maybe another Yara rune or something like that. And essentially what that would allow me to do is to drop everything on the ground. I would get 4 Temperance cards and then 4 Pertros, because remember, when I drop the Yara rune on the ground, I'm able to duplicate it with Diplopia, and then I can use both Yara runes to duplicate whichever consumables I would get. So that means I would essentially only need 1 Temperance card or 1 Judgment card to really guarantee myself getting both the Blank card and the Forget Me Now, and that would of course allow me to break the game. And that's what I was going for here. Sadly, like I said, it didn't really turn out well. Maybe I got a bit too cocky, maybe again I just didn't dodge well. I don't know what happened. I was maybe a bit distracted with everything. I was just kind of figuring all of this in my head as I was going. I decided on where the good position would be. I've been debated if I should just use Diplopia in this particular room, just in hopes that one of them, or at least some of these chests, had an item in them. And of course, I think so what would happen, maybe I didn't really clarify, but when I would duplicate a chest that has an item in them, that means that then that chest would also have an item in it, so that would just give me 4 items in that case. That would just allow me to get a bit stronger, and with the Persian rune I would be able to reroll the bad ones, and I think that would have been good, obviously, if I knew what those items were. They were Guppy's Head and Steven, which would be very helpful, because if I duplicated it, I would be able to get something even better, I think, and especially with the Perto Rune, maybe I would even be able to become Guppy. So I just felt like that was an opportunity which I kind of wasted, in the sense that I should have been a bit more ballsy. Saving Diplopia I don't think is bad for sure, but when you're in a position where you really can't play that well, and I knew it, I just felt like I should have gone for the safer route, even if that meant having less overall score in the end. And of course, I did end up walking in one of those tri-shots that just kind of split off. I thought it was safe, but my speed just kind of drifted me into one of those stairs and I ended up dying. In the 232nd place, I'm not too upset by this score because it's still in the like top 5%, but still, I know it could have been a lot better if I just didn't die in that case. If I just was a bit more careful, if I Diplopia'd any of the Spirit Hearts, I think I would be able to actually get to the end. So I think in the end, my indecision of what I want to do with this item has led to my demise, and I think that was the mistake which we can kind of relate to in some sense. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you next time.